I've just muted you, Caitlin, so if you do want to say something, just unmute yourself. Okay, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We're doing this Lunch and Learn this month in November is on executive functioning through a neurodiverse-affirming lens. We thought that discussing executive functioning would be good. We've done a whole lot of topics, and I think executive functioning is one area that a lot of people sort of have interest in and find kind of challenging or difficult or whatnot. So we thought it would be good to talk about, and it's also something that we support a lot of our young people with here at Sisu Therapies. So yeah, we'll get started. Today our plan for the day is we will go through understanding what executive functioning is, how our executive functioning differences impact daily life. We're going to have a look at all the different types of executive functioning skills, what that looks like, learn about the link between executive functioning differences and neurodivergence. And we're then going to do, to kind of put some of that together, we're going to do a bit of a practice run where we're going to look at an occupation and then breaking that up into all the different steps and seeing what different executive functions we would need to do that task and how we use our different executive functioning skills through that. And then also understanding ways to support executive functioning differences, including practical strategies. So what is executive functioning? Well, executive functions are a mental set of skills that are used to help a person plan, organize, and achieve a goal. So when we talk about executive functioning, we're sort of talking about those skills very broadly. So these executive functioning skills are known as the air traffic control, or like the CEO of the brain, because they help us manage information, make decisions, plan ahead. And so these are skills that definitely develop over time. So younger kids won't have as advanced executive functioning skills as adults. But there are certain things that impact our ability to use these executive functioning skills. Some people have a lot more challenges or difficulties or differences with their executive functioning than others. But yeah, so overall executive functioning are those sorts of main skills that help us do all the sort of big higher order thinking that we need to throughout our day. So what are these skills? So different sort of assessments or different people will say that there are different numbers. So when I was doing my research for this presentation, some said that there were 7, some said that there were 9, some said that there were 8. I've picked these ones because these are the most sort of common ones that we would sort of explore and look through, but attention and sustained attention is one other thing in there as well that I haven't touched on, but I think the others touch on that a little bit as well. But what the research sort of says, or what most people agree, is that there are 3 sort of main core executive functioning sort of skills, and then all of these ones branch off those. So that is memory or working memory, the cognitive flexibility, and then that planning, organization, things like that. And so those are the main ones, and then these all kind of come out from there. So got working memory, so that's that ability, not necessarily that long-term memory, but that ability to hold, and it says manipulate, but like hold information in mind and do something with that information. So an example of when we might use working memory is things like doing math in our head, you know, trying to keep hold and working memory of the numbers and then what number that becomes, and then what's that number and what are we, you know, all of that. So that's sort of mental math, working memory. And that involves, yeah, that's one example. Or another example could be, you know, even having a conversation with someone and listening to what they're saying, you know, having to hold in mind that information that they're telling you. That is an example of when we would use our working memory. Inhibitory control or impulse control, that's that ability to sort of pause before acting or identify, you know, that ability to have that moment to go, oh, actually, is this the thing that I want to do right now? And it might be yes, and we go ahead and do it. Or it might be, oh, actually, no, now's not the right time. This is not what I do, or whatever that might be. So, you know, I think it's common that we hear or we often get sort of referrals for young people, not always, but especially, you know, young boys with ADHD saying, oh, they've just got no impulse control and they'll just do all these things, and you know, they'll just run around and do this, and they're always moving and they've always got this stuff going. So that's something that we sometimes will think about when we've got those presentations, like, oh, what sort of executive functioning differences are going on there. But yeah, so then we've got cognitive flexibility. So that's this ability to shift between ideas or tasks. So moving from one task to another, you know, if something goes wrong with our plan, our ability to say, adjust that plan, problem solve, and do something different. Yeah, that sort of cognitive flexibility, that ability to change our plans, change what we need to do, switch between tasks. When something doesn't go right, how can we problem solve and recover, those sorts of things. And then we've got planning and organization. So sometimes people will separate these into two executive functions, which I think would be appropriate. But so that planning side is that ability to sequence tasks, you know, sequencing, organizing, planning, knowing when things need to be or what time or how long it takes, and that sort of preparing. Or I need to do groceries, I need to cook dinner, for example. What groceries do I need? What food do I need to go in to cook this dinner? That ability to plan out and organize and figure out what's needed there. And then organization. So where do things belong? Where do things need to go? Do I need to organize this, organize that? Understanding, say, in your household, where do different items need to belong? Where do they need to live? But that ability to sequence and then structure tasks, which I think is something that we often maybe take for granted or don't realize how important it is. It's often something that I think this is one that often we assume people just know how to do, or it's like, oh, you're either good at planning and organization or you're not. But we use planning and organization in so many more tasks and occupations than just, I don't know, when people think of planning and organization, you might think of like an admin person, you know, planning and organizing all the folders or doing that sort of stuff. But we use planning and organization for all sorts of things, you know, having a shower, cooking, doing laundry, doing anything for our workplace, even things like, I want to take my dog for a walk. There's planning and organization that needs to happen for that to happen as well. So definitely throughout, we use this executive function for so many more things than we might realize. Task initiation. So I think task initiation is one that a lot of people don't realize is an executive function, but that's our ability to get started with a task when we need to do it, pretty much. So identifying, okay, I know I need to, you know, get up and have a shower, but that ability to then get up and actually go and do that task, or get up and actually go and have that shower. Task initiation, I think, is one thing that can sometimes be, or difficulties with task initiation or having a hard time, that's not a strength of someone's, where task initiation has really been a challenge for them, that can often then be mistaken for lack of motivation or avoidance or being difficult, when in fact it's just that they're having a really hard time, their brain is having a hard time with that initiation, or like the kick starting of the task, actually getting going and doing the thing that we need to do. So yeah, and then time management. So that's estimating, tracking, and prioritizing time. So time management, again, is a huge executive functioning skill. And it's not just about being able to time management. You think, oh, well, you got your assignments in on time, then you must be good at time management. But it's so much more than that. It's understanding how long our daily tasks are going to take us, being able to estimate that and estimating that somewhat correctly or appropriately, tracking our time, realizing how long we've spent doing something, and then being able to prioritize our time. So it can be really difficult. That can be a skill in its own, being able to identify and prioritize how long things are going to take us, then when we should do something, when we should do another. And I feel like the time management then kind of comes into that planning and organization. I think all of these executive functions definitely sort of overlap and work with each other. And if you're having a challenge with one, it might be that there's a challenge with another as well. They kind of all come into interact with each other. And within time management is this idea of time blindness. So you might have heard of that before. It's, you know, sometimes people use that term to describe what it's like when people have a really hard time with time management, and their ability to notice and their understanding and awareness of time can be really is it hard for them to maybe identify and notice and track time. So time blindness can kind of come under this executive functioning skill of time management. And then we've got emotional regulation. So emotional regulation, that ability to notice and manage our emotions, managing stress, managing frustrations, things like that. That is actually an executive functioning skill. And it's not an easy one, and it's something that can be really challenging, and depending, obviously, as we know, depending on the day, some days that might be easier for us to do, some days it might not be. But that emotional regulation doesn't yeah, that's an important skill, and it's a skill that often we need support with developing. So we know that emotional regulation, that's not something you're born with, the ability just to regulate your own emotions. You develop that skill over time, and we start with co-regulation, so support from a parent or a caregiver or someone who can support you to regulate, and then you develop in that skill over time. But if that's an executive functioning skill that's different for you, or a challenge for whatever reason, that can again impact all sorts of different occupations throughout our day. So even managing stress at work, being able to do things like have a shower and manage the frustration of maybe having to do something when we wanted to do something else, or being able to manage our emotions when we've got social things or family or other things going on with other people and relationship challenges. Like, that's something that's really important. And then the last one that I've sort of put down, we've also got attention down there at the bottom, but self-monitoring. So this is our ability to observe, evaluate, and adjust our own behavior, thoughts, and progress towards goals. So that's our ability to sort of identify what's going on, our ability to notice what's happening within ourselves, notice what's happening in our mind, like noticing our thoughts, noticing our behavior, being able to identify that, and then not just notice, but then adjust and do something about it. So again, this is quite a high level. All of these executive functioning skills are high level thinking, high level brain, high level thinking skills. And so this ability to self-monitor, evaluate, adjust our own behavior, have a big impact on our ability to do things like reaching goals, like getting assessments done, like finishing uni, like I don't know, doing home tasks, DIY things, whatever it might be. But that ability to sort of notice, reflect on where you're at in terms of your goal, adjust your behavior or your actions or whatever you need to do to then reach whatever goal you might have. So as I said before, there are other executive functioning skills that are mentioned. So some assessments even have as many as 10 different ones that they assess, but they're all kind of within these. So they're all similar. It might be verbal working memory versus visual working memory or things like that. They break it down a little bit more, but these are definitely the main ones that they all sort of fall under. So executive functioning and neurodivergence, and where that sort of comes into play, is it's common for neurodivergent folk to experience executive functioning differences. So it's hard to provide examples without wanting to feel like I'm being, like, not cliche is not quite the right word, but I guess not wanting to put particular stereotypes or just assuming that everyone experiences these things. So make sure that, I guess I don't want you to hear that I'm saying everyone who's autistic experiences these different difficulties or differences, and everyone who's got ADHD experiences these difficulties. But I guess these are ways that we might be able to, some examples that we might notice. So some young people that I work with, some autistic young people I work with, have a difference in the way that their cognitive flexibility is in their brain. Their brain is just wired differently, and cognitive flexibility is not one of those executive functions that develops as easily as others. And so their ability to switch then between tasks can sometimes provide a bit of a challenge for them, or their ability to problem solve when things don't go as the way that they planned can be really difficult. And so, with all of these differences, there might be strengths that come alongside that as well. So maybe their ability, because of they might have a hard time with that flexibility, that might mean that they are really able to see some of the details and things, and they're really good at staying on whatever task they're focused on, because they've got that sort of ability to stay really clear on what they're doing in that moment. But then at the same time, there might be the flip side where then there are some challenges with switching between tasks. Another example might be for our ADHDers, who I've definitely worked with a couple of young people who are ADHDers who have a hard time with that time blindness. So with that time management, executive functioning skills. So it can be a bit of a challenge sometimes for them to notice how long a task is taking them, or prepare or plan or estimate how long a task might take them. And so they might think it's only going to take them 10 minutes, but it ends up taking them an hour, or it could be the opposite, thinking that something's going to take them an hour to do and it actually takes them 5. And so that can kind of make it really difficult for them to get all the tasks done in the time frame that they wanted or were hoping for. But then within that, again, like their ability to hyper focus is a strength of an ADHD that's often spoken about. So their ability to focus on whatever they're doing for a really long period of time and really get really engaged into that and be really highly engaged and really in depth. And then even their time management challenges might make it interesting that they would have a strength in their ability to get things done really quickly, because they've maybe had to develop the skill of doing things really fast, because maybe their time management has meant that they've had to learn to sort of move things along really quick when they've realized they've run out of time. So it's difficult, because what often happens is that with executive functioning differences, they can often be labeled as character flaws and deficits rather than variations to how our brains work, and just a challenge or something that's different, or a thing that doesn't quite work for them. And that ability, that sort of labeling as a character flaw or a deficit, can actually be really harmful and unhelpful. So affirming language shifts away from that fixing or that negative sort of blaming or character flaw to a more supportive, understanding language. So for example, one that I've written there is, he's lazy and just avoiding doing the task. Whereas instead, if we were to switch our language around, we might be going, oh, he's overwhelmed by all the steps, because some of those executive functioning skills are, work different in his brain, or they're a little bit tricky for him. And then he's having difficulty initiating the task. Like that task initiation is just having a real hard time today. And so it's really difficult for him to get up and get going, rather than he's lazy and avoiding it, or he's lazy and unmotivated. So I think it's really important that when we're talking about, maybe ourselves, or we're talking about young people, or we're talking about friends and family who are having a hard time with executive functioning, or they have executive functioning differences, that we're really mindful not to be labeling them as things like unmotivated or unreliable or lazy, because 9 times out of 10, they probably believe and think that about themselves. So a lot of the young people that I've worked with around this sort of stuff often have those beliefs, and then they become internalized, and then there becomes a lot of shame and, frustration and self-deprecating thoughts and things that aren't super positive, because they end up believing those things to be true about themselves, that they are lazy, that they're unreliable, that they're unmotivated, when in fact that's not true. It's just that their brain works differently, and we can provide them support so that they can do these things that they want to be able to do. I think one of the other challenges, which I spoke a little bit about earlier, is that because these are called executive functioning skills, people might then think, oh, well, it's just a skill, so you can learn it. And while, there is a little bit of truth to that, in terms of these are skills that develop over time, and as you get older, they grow with you, and you develop them as you get older and as you grow. It's also not one of those things, and not one of those skills that you can just go, well, you need to try harder and you need to practice more, and then ta-da, no more differences or no more challenges with these executive functioning skills anymore. That's not the way it works. We're talking about our challenges with executive functioning, our differences in that the way our brains are wired. So the way that we can support people with these skills, or say developing these skills, or sorry, I've just had gas on the therapy dog open the door on us, would be more around providing them supports. So like, environmental supports, or adapting what they're doing to make it more suitable, or working with their brain to find ways that we can support them in this, rather than just going, well, you need to practice more and you need to try harder, because that is not going to work. That's not really the way that these executive functioning skills work. Okay, so I've just done a whole lot of yapping and I'm about to do some more, but I thought it would be good for us to sort of give this a real life example and practice together of what, in what situation, when would we use these executive functioning strategy skills? When would they come up? And I thought showering was a good one to do because it's often a task that I think is misunderstood at how complex it is. Showering and having a shower and all the steps that are involved in doing that is actually really complex and requires a lot of executive functioning skills. And it is one that a lot of our young people have a hard time with for whatever reason. Now, showering as well comes with its whole own range of sensory sensitivities and sensory challenges as well. And that's not necessarily something I'm going to touch on today, but it is worth keeping in mind as well if you're, say, someone comes to mind when you're doing this activity together and you're like, oh yeah, maybe I have a young person or a child or someone I'm working with, or maybe it's yourself. But also just keep in mind that there are like the sensory differences and sensory sensitivities might also be coming into play with sharing, and that's a whole other thing in itself. So I've broken down, I could have broken showering down even more, but I thought let's break it down broadly into the main sort of steps that we would need to do to be able to have a shower and get in the shower. So the first one, recognizing it's time to shower. So just being able to recognize and notice that, okay, I need to be having a shower, it's time to shower. That, as some of the executive functions included in being able to do that, is self-monitoring. So that ability to notice, like, what are we doing? Where are we at? What do I have to do today? What's important? Where am I at? What do I need to do? So recognizing it's even time to have a shower is that ability with self-monitoring. And then finishing the current task that we're doing to be able to then move to having a shower. So I don't know what time other people shower, but maybe it's finishing eating dinner to then be able to go up and have a shower, or maybe it's finishing sitting on the couch watching some TV before going up and having a shower. But it's that ability to finish up that current task before moving on to the next one. And so that in itself, finishing up the current task, I think that involves that ability for self-monitoring as well as cognitive flexibility. So that ability to move from one task to another, to move our brains and help with that transition from one task to another. And then maybe even emotional regulation. So if you're really loving the TV show, say, that you're watching, or your young person is really loving what they're doing in that moment, and then it's time to have a shower, having to move from a preferred task or something that we're really loving and enjoying to something like showering, which may or may not be something we really love and enjoy, that might require some ability to regulate our emotions. Maybe we're feeling sad, maybe we're feeling frustrated, maybe we're annoyed, maybe we're just irritated and don't feel like having a shower. But whatever that is, that involves that ability to emotionally regulate as well. And then this is all we've done anything. We're still at this point sitting on the couch watching TV, right? We recognize we need to have a shower, we're sort of finishing up that task, maybe we're turning off the TV, realizing that we have to do that. And then it's the actual getting up. It's the moving. And that is our task initiation. Our ability to start the task, move, actually go, our brain's ability to kind of kickstart like the motor, like I say, it's turning on a car, you've got to be able to boom, like actually move and get going. That task initiation is just actually getting up. And then we've got gathering clothes, gathering our towel, gathering any additional items you might need for the shower. That all involves our ability to plan and organize. So that executive functioning skill of planning and organization. That also involves our working memory, being able to go, okay, what have I got? What do I need to get? What am I missing? Do I have to get something else? Keeping that all in mind and then manipulating that, almost keeping a list in your head, I suppose, that it is that working memory. And then also inhibitory control. So our ability to sort of manage our attention and manage our impulses around, maybe you walked into your room, you found your clothes, found your towel, whatever else you needed to bring, but then there was something else in your room that you found and you're like, oh, I forgot that I was going to do that, or oh man, I hadn't seen that in ages. And then all of a sudden you haven't had a shower and it's been an hour and you're in your room with something else that you found, or whatever it might be. But that ability to sort of keep on task and keep our attention focused on what we were doing. So that gathering clothes, towel, and additional items takes a lot of executive functioning to be able to do just that one part of this task. And we've got turning on and adjusting the water tap, that takes, cognitive flexibility. If the tap doesn't, the water doesn't come out the way you expected, being able to adjust that. Our working memory, being able to know which way is what, and planning and organization, and our ability to understand which way did I turn it, wait, which way is on, which way is off, and that ability to manage all of that. And then we've got washing all the parts of our body. So that comes planning and organization, being able to know what parts we need to wash, how do we need to do it. Working memory. Have I washed there already? Have I washed under my arms? Do I need to wash them again? Which parts have I washed? I don't remember if I've done that. Did I put soap on my hands? I think I did. But that ability to sort of manage all of that thing, all those things that we're doing at once in our hands. And then even that, within that task initiation, you might be standing in the shower and then find that we need that another task initiation to actually do more than just stand under the water. So we need to use these different executive functioning skills, and a lot of them all at once throughout this one occupation of showering. And then washing our hair, again, similarly, being able to plan on that, knowing what we need to, what shampoo we need to use. Are we up to shampoo? Have we already shampooed? Are we shampooing once? Are we shampooing twice? How many times have I shampooed already? So that's that working memory getting involved there as well. And then time management kind of comes in with showering within a reasonable time frame. It can be really easy, I think, to get lost when we're in the shower around how long it's taken us. And if time management and understanding time is challenging for a young person or for someone, I think it can be really hard to notice, how long have I been in the shower? How long have I been washing my hair for? Have I been standing here for longer than I initially thought, rinsing out my hair? And so that ability to know what time it is, manage time, is kind of going on really throughout the whole entire shower from start to finish. That's a whole thing going throughout the whole task. And then we've got turning off the tap. So again, working memory, planning and organization, time management in that, and then drying, working memory as well. Which part of our body have we dried? Planning and organization. Is there a way we need to dry our body? Does it make sense to dry my hair first or my back first, or which parts do I need to dry? Task initiation. I think, I have had it worked with a couple of young people where it's getting out of the shower is fine, and then you just sit there and you find that you're stuck sitting there out of the shower next to the shower on the floor, because the next task of drying your whole body, that's requiring more mental energy and more executive functioning, and that, you're the start of the car's turned off and you need to restart again. That task initiation is difficult. And depending on what showering is like for you, you might be needing to use emotional regulation, executive functioning skill throughout this all as well. It might be uncomfortable. It might be from that sensory, really an uncomfortable sensory experience. It might, for whatever reason, you might need to be using your emotional regulation throughout. And then dressing as well, making sure, planning an organization, making sure we're putting on the right things we need to put on first, we're putting them on the right way, back to front, inside out, whatever that might be. Working memory, what have we put on? What else do we need to put on? And then throughout all this as well, inhibitory control, making sure, where is our attention? Are we focused on what we're doing? Have we been distracted? Are we doing something else in the bathroom? Have we found our phone and now we're scrolling on our phone accidentally instead of getting dressed and getting changed? All of these things. So the reason I wanted to go through a task and sort of do it together is I wanted to help us understand how we use these executive functions throughout our day all the time, and that everyday task that we might think as pretty simple actually use a lot of these executive functioning skills. And so if you are someone, or if you work with someone, or you have a child who has these executive functioning differences and their brain works a little bit differently, these tasks that we might think of as simple actually really complicated, and they're complicated for us too. It's just that our brains seem to be able to do these things a little bit differently than others. But maybe for them, if some of these executive functionings are difficult, something like having a shower might actually be really challenging and take up a lot of that mental energy. So we're going to move on now, after sort of doing that, into some sort of practical strategies for support. And I think one thing that I want to sort of caveat this all with is that some of these strategies just may not work for people. And I think executive functioning can be a real great place to work in, helping and supporting people with identifying the executive functioning skills and which ones are their strengths, which ones are where they have maybe more challenges and need some more supports. But a lot of these things may not work for some people, or maybe they've tried them and it just hasn't worked for them. So please take all of these strategies as like an idea and something worth trying. And something that I'll often say to my young people is that, look, let's give it a go. Worst that can happen is that it doesn't work for you, and then we'll come back to the drawing board and try something else. And sometimes noticing when things don't work can almost give as much information as if they did work, because then we can go, okay, why didn't it work? What got in the way? What were the barriers? So I sort of just want to caveat that with some of these strategies might be like, well, Megan, we've all tried writing things down before and it hasn't worked. That's okay. But maybe another young person hasn't tried it and it might work for them. So for working memory, some of the strategies we can try is talking things out loud, trying to remember a number or something. You might want to say it out loud rather than just relying purely on that internal working memory, using verbally. That might work for you, being able to say things out loud. All the time that may not work depending on the situation and what's happening, but that could be something worth trying. Writing it down, whether it's in your notes or in a notebook or whatever. Using things like Alexa, Google Home, Siri to set reminders, to put lists together for you, to set alarms, whatever it might be. Using the technology that we've got access to, I think, is absolutely worth giving a go. And that can even, I know of people and families who've used things like Google Home to create a routine and create themselves a routine for the morning so that there doesn't have to be as many things for them to remember to do. But Google Home will, hey, it's this time. Now it's time to do this task, or now it's time for you to do this thing, or whatever. Pardon me. So within that, again, building a routine or habit stacking. So finding things where you don't have to rely so much on your working memory, finding other ways to make it just a part of what you do every day, so you don't have to rely on it as much. And then texting yourself. And a thing that we have found out recently is that you can actually, depending on the phone you've got, you can text yourself and put a timer. So you can make the text. What's the word, Danny? Setting a timer. You can text yourself with a timer.
Like delayed
text message. Something. There's a word for it. I can't think of it. I wrote text yourself, and I was going to reminded me to talk to you about this. But it's that ability. You can send a text, but you can send it later. So if you're like, oh, feed the dog, and then you can set it to text that to you on your
sent later.
Sent later. There you go. That's what it's called. Under Apples and iPhones, sent later is what you can put down, so it can get it to send it to you at the time when you would need to do it. And then as well, pair verbal information with visual information. So if that's things like using visuals, using visual reminders, or can you, if you're, say, getting information from someone, you're getting instructions, can we get verbal instructions and visual instructions and written instructions? Can we get multiple different ways of getting the information we need so that it's not just relying on the one verbal working memory, if that's the way that you're thinking, or visual working memory? Can we try and include as many as possible in that? For inhibitory control, depending on what you're doing, movement can be really good. So making sure you're giving your opportunity for movement breaks, having things like fidgets present for you if you find that you're feeling that need to move or whatever it might be, sensory strategies to support attention. So if that is that you find, it's really hard for that inhibitory control when you're moving between tasks and you're really wanting your attention to stay on one thing. Can we use some sensory strategies for that? Maybe it is using a fidget. Maybe it's using things like sour lollies or cold or crunchy snacks or whatever it might be that can help you sustain your attention on things you need to. One thing I put in here was I was thinking about, inhibitory control for maybe online shopping. Don't save your card details. Can we put as many things in the way of where our sort of things that might be challenges for us lie? And so I put that down as create stimulus barriers, a similar sort of thing, but don't save your card details, or give yourself a couple of extra steps between you and the thing that you maybe want to take a moment to think about before you do it. So the idea of sleeping on it or keeping a list can be really good. I really want to do this thing. I really want to buy this thing. Can we try our best to keep a list, write it down, and if you still want to do it tomorrow, then you do it tomorrow. Again, keeping some predictable routines can be helpful. So where this is just a part of what you do, this is your routine, that's how you go and that's how your brain works, and it's kind of comfortable for you. So then there's less ability for you, your brain to kind of want to move you into different directions. Mindfulness. So I know so many people, when I say mindfulness, will be like, oh, Megan, you're really not suggesting mindfulness. But a mindfulness that works for you. So have a think about whether it's just a little saying that you might say to yourself, like, oh, stop, pause, take breath. And that might be enough to sort of give you that break between what your brain was sort of like wanting to move to you quickly and that ability to sort of have a think about and think about whether this is actually something that you want to do. Or noticing what's happening in your bodies, noticing that your thoughts are moving really quickly, noticing that your brain is wanting to move to something else. Whatever it might be, but have a bit of a go at trying to find some mindfulness or some ways that you can pay attention to what's happening in your brain and even in your body, that will work. And then creating stimulus barriers. So that's things like even, on your phone, can you put away so that's like a focus mode or something if you find that your phone is something that can be really distracting for you? Can you put focus mode on so notifications don't show up? Or can you close down apps for a certain period of time? Or what sort of things can you put in place to create those barriers that happen between you and the thing that you notice is a challenge in that space? Cognitive flexibility, using things like visuals and visual routines might be helpful so you can kind of see what's happening and see where you're going. Creating structured flexibility, so making sure you have a little bit of wiggle room between your plans and your structures and your routines for things to maybe change, or you're a bit to give your brain that bit of extra time that it might need to be able to come up with that plan B. And then even things like practicing plan B. It's okay if that cognitive flexibility is something that's really difficult. Coming up and planning and preparing for a plan B may not be a bad idea, especially if it's, say, going to a new place or it's something that's particularly big and difficult. Practicing for that plan B can be really helpful. And think of something fun or find a humorous way to try and sort of maybe get around some of these cognitive flexibility challenges you might have, or maybe there's something that's gone wrong and you might find a way to kind of make it humorous or find something funny rather than trying to hold on to it too closely and trying to deflect it from yourself, like sort of diffusing that away from yourself and into something that's kind of funny. And then planning and organization, of course I'm going to put down there using a digital or a paper planner. We love a calendar, we love having those things available to use. Reverse planning, so starting from the goal and then moving backwards. Okay, what are the different steps that I would need for the goal rather than starting from the beginning? Because I think starting from the beginning can be really like, oh, I don't even know where to start. Let's start from the end and we can work backwards. Decluttering your space can be really helpful. And I've said in brackets with urgency if that helps. So I don't know, maybe saying, well, I've booked for someone to come over and see my house, so I'm going to have to declutter everything and give some space. Or, I've said to my boss that my desk is going to be clean by a certain time, or finding ways that you can sort of put in a sense of urgency if that works for you. But decluttering and having a clear space can actually be really helpful in that planning and organizing. So there's less that you need to organize. Pair planning with dopamine. So finding a way, if planning is really difficult and it's really awful, it's not something that you really love, can you plan it? Can you bring it up? Can you do it while something enjoyable at the same time? So can you go out for coffee? Can you do it with pets? Can you do it with a friend? Can you listen to music? Find a way to add something that brings that joy and brings that dopamine to you so that it's not as difficult of a task, hopefully. And then time blocking. So if you're planning and organizing, putting that time blocking, like this time I'm going to do this time I'm going to do that, this time I'm going to do this. And then make sure within that you have breaks for fun, breaks for dopamine, breaks for getting up and doing things that are going to help give you that energy back again. Or within that, breaks for maybe you're like, you know what, I know I probably could do this in an hour, but I know that my brain with my time management sometimes takes me an hour and a half or whatever. Give yourself that space and that time to do that. Task initiation, body doubling. So body doubling is this idea that you do a task with another person, and that can be physically someone else or online even, and that doesn't even need to be that person is doing the same task as you. It could be that they're just present while you're doing a task. But often body doubling can help for a lot of our executive functioning skills, but I think at task initiation especially, that someone can be there while you're doing it. They can help you sort of get moving. Maybe you're just having a chat and all of a sudden you're doing the task that you needed to do. Micro start, so that's that ability to just be like, okay, I'm just going to do one thing. Sorry, I think my computer is going off. just do one thing. So can I just open my computer? That's all I'm going to do. Or can I just open up the file that I need, and then it's going to sit there, and that's the start. That's at least doing something, getting that initiation started. Or that idea for just 5 minutes. I'm just going to do this assignment for 5 minutes. I'm just going to clean my room for 5 minutes. And that's all it is. You just put on a song or whatever it might be, just for 5 minutes. And you might find that that's all you do. You just do for 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes is better than no minutes. Or you might find that once you've started, you've done 5 minutes and you're like, actually, I could keep going. And then lowering friction. So having things set up, having things ready to go, having as many barriers out of the way as possible can make that initiation a lot easier. So maybe your clothes that you need or the tasks or the tools you need are already out and set up, and you're able to do that, or someone else was able to support you and do that for you, so it's out and ready to go. Or your keys and your wallet and everything are in a spot where you need to go, so it's easy to get up and move. But lowering the friction, getting rid of some of those barriers, as many as we can. Using interest or novelty, so finding a way to make it fun, or novel, or giving yourself a little bit of like oh man, if I can get this done and do this thing, then maybe I can reward myself with my favorite chocolate or whatever. I don't know if that works for you, but finding ways to kind of make it fun and interesting or novel. And then the idea of just moving your body in whatever way. Maybe you're lying on the couch and it's really hard to sort of, that task initiation has been really difficult. You're finding that paralysis, you're kind of stuck in. I really want to get up and do this thing that I want to do, but I cannot. My brain and my body is not moving. Move your body in any way. That means just like wiggling out on the couch, or like getting up and you're going to like do this, or you get up and dance to a song or whatever. Moving your body in any way can kind of help kickstart that initiation. And then we've got time management. So visual or wearable timers can be helpful. So you can actually see how long you've got left and visually see how much time it's taken you, can be really helpful. Have planned time for transitions, and build in buffer zones. So if you're planning out your day and planning for time, have that buffer for the time throughout your day. So don't leave it minute to minute, like you've really got to move from the next task to the next. Give yourself a little bit of that buffer and that space. Habit stack, or using of like time anchors. So like, okay, I know I do this, and then this, and dinner is at 6, and I know that that's when dinner happens, and that's what works. So I'm going to do this first, and that first, and then dinner. Or finding ways to kind of make that a part of the routine. Again, yeah, building routines. And then my favorite one is this idea of just try it and time it. It's a bit of an experiment that we've been trying a little bit in the office, but this ability to like, when we have difficulty with time management, sometimes we have a hard time estimating how long a task is going to take. And so we've tried to sort of try it and time it. So I think hang out the washing is going to take me 20 minutes. And then you try it and you time it and it actually takes you 3. Or it might be this other thing that seems, really difficult, or it's going to take like, it's a really long time, it's really overwhelming, it's going to be really hard. Let's just try it and time it. And you can almost make a bit of a fun or make a challenge out of it, being like, I'm going to try it, I'm going to time it, and I'm going to see how long it's actually going to take me. And not always, but 9 times out of 10, that usually takes less time than we expect it to. So that can be a fun sort of way to sort of make it a little bit fun, make it a little bit of like a challenge, or a way to kind of make a bit of fun out of it and kind of go, oh, but at the same time, it's helping you notice and helping you identify how long things take, and helping you with that time management, time estimation as well. So in emotional regulation, I think co-regulation is really important. So that's your ability, having another person to be able to help regulate. And that doesn't need to be in doesn't need to necessarily be a hug or whatever. I think we often think of co-regulation for children, you co-regulate with your child, but I co-regulate with people all the time as an adult. We'll have a chat, we might have a rant, we might need to get all our frustrations out, or, I've had a bad day, I'm going to go home and ask my husband for a hug. Like, it's something that we do as adults as well. So not being afraid to utilize our people and our supports and our social systems to help us regulate as well. Scheduling downtime is really important. Identifying your energy stealers and energy givers. So another, people, if you may have heard of something called the spoon theory, that could be a good thing to look into if you're interested. But it's this idea of identifying, okay, we've only got so many spoons in the day. What things take up my energy? What things take up my spoons? And what things might give me some spoons? And how can I be mindful of that? And how can I be aware of when my spoons are out and they're empty? Replace shoulds with I need supports. Like, I should be able to do this, with I need some support to be able to do this, or I should be able to do that. I need some extra supports to do this today. And that's okay. So around being sort of kind to yourself and understanding how your brain is working and being able to be kind with that. And even with people you're supporting, like, oh, my kid should be able to, or this child should be able to do this, instead of maybe replacing that with, oh, my child needs some extra support to be able to do this, and then doing that. Identifying regulation strategies and then implementing them throughout the day. So this is a really big one that I think I harp on about quite a lot, is we don't need to be dysregulated before we implement our regulation strategies. Ideally, we don't want to wait until that point. So using your things that you know help keep you calm, the things that you know help, calm your body, help give you energy, whatever it might be that you need, and do them throughout the day. Don't wait until it's the end and you're starting to feel dysregulated. Do it beforehand. So finding different times throughout the day when that's kind of your anchors, maybe at lunchtime, before you go back to work, or before you go back into class, or before whatever it might be, you have your 2 minutes and then you do something that works for you then. Maybe it's a cold drink of water, maybe it's a couple of deep breaths, maybe it's a bit of a mindfulness thing, whatever it might be, doing it then, and then you do it when you get home, and then you do it here and you do it there, and finding opportunities to implement them throughout the day. So it's not just when you need them, but you've already pre-implemented them so that you're hopefully staying more regulated throughout the day. And then self-monitoring. So using reflection prompts, it might be someone who enjoys doing some journaling, and you might be able to have some of those questions in there, or it might just be, you could have it up on the mirror at night, with a couple of prompts of like, what was good today? What went well? What was tricky? Or using other people to help, like talking with someone about it, like using other people in your life to help with that reflection. So maybe if it's at a workplace, you'd be able to talk to your boss or your supervisor or a colleague. Or at school, it might be your teachers or friends or whatever it might be, or parents, helping with some of those reflection questions and prompting and supporting with that. Using accountability tools if you can be kind to yourself about it. So this is a big one. I am always hesitant to encourage people to use too many accountability tools if it becomes a thing that then they are down on themselves for not being able to reach the goals and not being able to do the things that they attempted or tried or set up to do. So some of those things might be like habit trackers, or things where you go, this is the goal I want to do by this date. I want to be able to achieve this, or I want to have done it 3 days by this, or coloring in the different dots in the week. And that might be really helpful. But if that's going to then lead to shame or deprecating thoughts or low self-esteem, then maybe let's not do that, and we can find other strategies to put in place. Have a buddy join you. So that's, again, was sort of similar to body doubling, but can you have someone join with you on the task? Do you both have a similar goal? Do you both have the same goal? Is it something that you can both work on your own separate goals, but together? How can you bring someone else in that they can support you? And then celebrating progress, not perfection. So celebrating those small wins, even if you feel like it's not perfect. And I know that can be really hard for people. If it's not perfect, then it's not done, but celebrating those small wins, celebrating the progress, celebrating that it took you, less time to get started than it did last time, or celebrating that it was easier for you this time than it was last time, or celebrating that you were able to find different supports that worked for you. Like, that's really important. And then I think the biggest strategy, and the thing that I have found most helpful and I think is really important to think about overall when we're thinking about executive functioning and strategies, is to work with your brain rather than against your brain. So if your brain is wired differently, if our brains are wired differently, and we know that working memory and time management it's not an executive functioning skill that comes easy for us, then let's find other ways that work with our brain, rather than trying to make our brain have a good working memory or trying to do good time management. Let's put supports in place. Let's find creative ways to work with our brain. I've talked to young people about things like, okay, we have a hard time brushing our teeth at night and in the morning. Can we brush them in the middle of the day? Can we brush them when you remember? Can we work with your brain and finding different ways to do these things we want to do even if maybe society thinks that, well, that's very strange to brush your teeth in the middle of the day. Hey, I think brushing your teeth in the middle of the day is better than not doing it at all. Or having things like, let's put toothbrushes in the kitchen, let's put them in the bathroom, let's put them in, different places. Put one in your bag in case you go to school or you go to work and you're like, oh man, I forgot to brush my teeth. Finding ways to just work with your brain and setting up these support systems so that we can still do the things we want to do and need to do and have to do in new and fun and creative ways rather than trying to fight your brain. Let's work with it. So mostly the main sort of things in conclusion, I feel like there was a lot of information. I think executive functioning is a huge topic, and I tried to just sort of touch on a couple of things, and obviously each person is unique and different, but the main sort of things I hope that we were able to get away from today was that let's work with the brain, not against it. That executive functioning differences are variances and not character flaws, and let's be mindful of maybe changing our language around that. Let's focus on supporting and scaffolding. So can we find supports? Can we scaffold these things? And let's be creative in that. And then finally, let's be kind to our brains and be kind to our young people's brains. And let's encourage our young people to be kind to their brains as well, because at the end of the day, if you're more positive and are able to think more positively, speak more positively about yourself and your brain, you're more likely to be able to implement these things. And, it just makes for better mental health and well-being overall. Really important that we're kind to ourselves and kind to our brains and are thinking of these differences and trying to find the strengths in that as well, and trying to find the things that are really good about them, and from that really strengths-based point of view as well is really important. So that's kind of all the stuff that I had. Were there any questions before we finish up today?
I did have a couple.
Go for it.
It's okay. It was really good. I studied psychology a few years ago now, so I feel like this was like a really nice refresher, but also haven't seen it from like occupational therapist point of view, even though I worked with a lot of OTs when I worked in hospitals. So yeah, it's interesting, especially at the showering, to look at it from that perspective. So my first question was, because I work at Lifeblood, so I work with people who are donating like blood or plasma for the first time, and like when we bring them in and we do their consent form and things, it's like quite an overwhelming experience. And when you're doing like plasma for the first time, there's a lot of steps involved in that, and there's a lot of things you need to keep in mind, not just like as we're putting the needle in, but like during the whole procedure. And I've got a lot of family who are neurodivergent, so I'm like pretty good at kind of thinking like, oh, you might be on a spectrum, so maybe I need to adjust how I behave with you to help you like through the process a bit better. And like mostly I do that by just kind of like trying to create something very predictable, like, oh, this is what you're going to feel now, or this is what you're going to feel at this point, or just trying to slow down like the procedural information I give and just kind of like limit it to what you really need to know rather than all the various things. But I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you think would be helpful, especially in like quite a clinical environment, to help people who are experiencing that for the first time.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think exactly what you're doing is great. And you could always, like, depending on who it is and depending on what they need, level it up a little more to maybe make like here's some visuals that go alongside it. Like some people might find it helpful to see what's going on or see the steps visually. That's when you have a little like brochure thing that they can have a little bit of a look through and read, or is there something that they can take home? I'm sure you might have all these things already, but is there things that they can take home with them to then look back at and reflect on? Or if they, I don't know how it all works, but if they pre-sign up to come, can maybe send something to have a look at, or so that they come in already slightly prepared. Could be good.
That's what I found.
Ideas?
No, not really. That all makes sense.
Cool. I was just asking Danny if she had any other ideas, but yeah, was that helpful? I feel like what you're doing sounds really good.
Oh no, that is helpful, because I think we do have all that information, but maybe I forget to like really highlight it for people who are neurodivergent, to be like, this is what you can expect, or like these are the resources you can reach out to if there's parts of the experience that were confusing today, or So yeah, no, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah, and finding ways to maybe like highlight the most important parts, or really breaking it down, or making it clear in different ways. Yeah, great. Any other questions?
I did have another one.
Go for it.
But I know it towards the end of the session. This is more like personal interest. So like I'm neurodivergent. I have OCD. But I guess like a lot of the stuff I see executive functioning wise is around like autism and ADHD, but I find like I have a lot of like changes in my executive functioning too, which has taken like a really long time to identify, because I don't think it's like quite normalized. Like I have I'd say like lower cognitive flexibility than like a lot of people, and I was just curious if you do work with young people who have OCD, and like what kind of executive deficits you see in them, and how do you support them in that, which is quite a broad question. But
I think executive functioning differences and challenges are absolutely not just exclusive to autism and ADHD. You know, neurodivergence is a big like umbrella that autism and ADHD are in there, but there's also OCD and dyslexia and dyscalculia and all those other things, and lots of other diagnoses and things kind of fall under that umbrella, and brain differences fall under that umbrella. I would only say I've worked with a handful of young people around OCD and executive functioning stuff, but definitely that cognitive flexibility is something that we've sort of been able to work on, and just finding ways to sort of support, and sometimes doing that planning of like the plan B can be helpful. Like, let's talk about it. Like, let's make some plans for our plans. Let's plan for when the plan doesn't work. And sort of practicing and role playing that and doing that together has been helpful. I'm just trying to think if there was any other ones that come to my mind. Depending on how what it's like for them, and maybe how their OCD presents, even things like that time management stuff, and time awareness, and ability to understand how long things are going to take, and their time understanding can be a bit of a challenge. And even things like, it was in my brain and now it's just gone. I don't know, it went from my brain. Time. I'll stick with time. There was another executive functioning that went in there, and now it's flown out, but that's okay. But doing sort of, again, those same strategies, and just finding out, like, all these strategies that I've sort of put up there are ones that I might think about and go to, and then if we try something and it doesn't work, then we kind of go, okay, well, how can we adapt this to make that work for you? Like, what other strategies, what other supports can we put in place? I don't know if I have any more responses to that. There was another thought and now it's gone, but that's okay. I can always, if you have any more questions, feel free also to send us an email. I didn't put our email on there, but you can send me an email at any time, and I'm happy to respond when we've got the time to do that. Hope that is okay. Helpful.
Yeah, it's helpful. It's helpful, yeah.
I might, just because I will have to run off to another appointment, we might end it there, but thank you so much for joining. I'll stop our recording now.